What's up, everyone? This is Ryan here, and you're watching episode 35 of my, 36 of my live stream Q&A. So for today's episode, I don't have a whole lot planned, just a couple of announcements, and basically going to jump right into Q&A after that. But before that, the following show is brought to you by me and the wonderful support that I receive from people who help me out on Patreon, or like my videos, or comment on my videos, or like my Wise Ass page on their preferred social media networks. And if you like what I do and would like to see me do it better, then please consider doing any of those things, which leads me to the following wonderful people who support me on Patreon. And that is Seth Keegan, Trevor Halvorsen, Bassam Helal, Tina Fredericks, Nanotech, A. Mon, Mr. Bidwell, Graham Hertzeg, Sushil Chanda, Elad Stavi, Shoku Mostofi, and Tomas. So to all those people, I say thank you very much. It's much appreciated. So, yeah, like I say, not a huge amount planned for today's episode. I'm just going to try and get as many questions done as possible. Of course, if you're a beginner, then please do ask a question, because a lot of times what happens is I'm very happy to try and help people with implementation problems. Like, for example, if people want to know about, how do I fix my Dagger 2 implementation or RxJava and all that stuff. And I do try to help people with that, but you have to understand that in many cases it's pretty difficult for me to, off the top of my head, answer those sorts of questions. So what I'm trying to say here is, if you're a beginner, please ask a question. I'm not going to make you feel stupid. If your English isn't great, that's totally fine. English is a crazy language. Anyways, let's get to some announcements. So, just a couple of things. So first and foremost, I wrote an article on Model View Presenter last week, and it is finally up and readable. What I'll do is I'll just pull it up here and post a link in the description box below. And as I'm kind of talking here and pulling this link up, I've changed my microphone setup a little bit, so it's actually on the desk instead of on my chest, because I was finding I was getting weird audio. Sometimes my microphone would randomly decide to up the volume by 30 decibels. So if the sound's not really working out, please do let me know if it's a little bit quiet or something like that. Anyways, just fire this in there. So I just posted a link in the comments section there to that article. So basically what the article was is it's two things. Number one, it's my sort of general... Oh, the tape that's holding my microphone on my desk is already coming apart. So the article is basically two things. Number one, it's meant to introduce you to three-layer architectures such as Model View Presenter, Model View Viewmodel, and Model View Controller and that kind of stuff, and to actually get you sort of thinking, well, why do we actually do this? How does it work? What does it actually mean? What does Model View Presenter actually friggin' mean in a non-abstract way? Because I find one thing that's kind of a difficulty with programming is that a lot of these things in order for me to talk about them and explain them, I kind of need to talk about these nebulous, abstract ideas versus showing you literally right in the code. So so that's one of the things. And the other thing is just the whole background. Why do we even bother separating things into three layers? Why did we pick those three layers? Why do we always have a view and a model, and then the other thing is different? So anyways, I get into all that good stuff in the article, and I tried to keep it fairly limited in terms of jargon, although there's a couple terms I introduced, such as cohesion and separation of concerns, which are terms you want to know, but I think I still explained them fairly well. So that's announcement number one. Go check out that article. Basically, if someone asks me about Model View Presenter from here on, I'm basically going to be pointing them to that article, and eventually I'll be doing a video series on it. Anyways. So that's announcement number one. Number two, I probably won't have much content in April. So I recently got a new job, and I will be moving out of where I currently live, which is basically in the city I live, which is Victoria, BC. I basically live in like probably the worst neighborhood, arguably the worst neighborhood in the city. So it's pretty damn hilarious. Like there are literally people. I don't want to freak anyone out, but there are literally people shooting up drugs like with needles or smoking meth right outside my front door. But luckily it's Canada, so they're still pretty nice anyway, and you just kind of carry on and be like, oh, hey, what's up? And they're like, oh, hey, man. Anyways, but yeah. Suffice it to say, I'm going to be moving most likely at the start of April 1st, and so in that time I'm probably not going to have internet. I'm probably going to be focusing on moving, and so you'll just have to kind of bear with me. Also, April is a month where most of my friends have birthdays, so it's just generally not a super productive month for me. So, but lots of content I'm going to be working on in March, and let's anyways move on to the next thing. After April kind of break, I'm going to be shifting my focus to working on a couple of larger applications. And so that's going to mean I'm not going to have as much time to make videos. Now, I know I don't have the highest output of videos anyway, but I generally try for quality over quantity. But in any case, I will be releasing some stuff before then that'll be like a general purpose introduction to Kotlin and things like that. But after that, between my new job and moving and all that stuff, I'm just not going to have a whole lot of time to make tutorials. I like making the tutorials, but you guys have to understand, guys and girl, guys is a gender neutral term, honestly. You guys have to understand that I like doing the tutorials, but they take a really long time to make, and I just don't always have that time. And they take a long time to make well, and that's the difficulty. So anyways, during that period though, and this kind of leads me to my kind of last thing I wanted to talk about here, and I'd even like to hear some input on this from the chat. So basically, I'm probably, after April, what I'm thinking of doing is I'll try and do probably 2 live streams a week. I don't really know. I don't like to nail myself down without knowing my situation in a couple months, but this is what I'm planning. I'll probably do a second Q&A stream a week. I don't know if the format will change, but we'll, as my dad would say, we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Yeah, and I'm also considering, so currently we have a Slack channel. Link in the description box below. If you want to sort of communicate with me and sort of the group of developers that sort of, you know, do us a great service and teach me stuff in the chat and all that kind of stuff. Like this Wise Ass thing, we've got a decent group of developers going, and I'm very happy about it. I don't take ownership over that. It's just, you know, a nice place where a bunch of people can talk about programming. We currently have a Slack channel, and you can join it just down below by clicking the invite link. And I'm also considering having a second app or something like that where I can be available for voice chat. Basically, certain hours of the day, whether I'm coding or playing CSGO, Rashbi, Sukabliat, then you'll be able to basically chat with me and ask me questions, and just about anyone will be able to do it. So of course there's going to be a bunch of trolls, but that's okay. I can deal with trolls. I've worked in kitchens and construction sites. No one scares me. So anyways, I'm just messing around. So anyways, yeah, so what I would like to ask people, I asked this in the Slack channel, but what does everyone think about having basically a second app? I like the Slack quite a bit, but having a second app where certain hours of the day you can basically just come in and ask me questions. And again, like, I'm not your monkey. You still have to be respectful to me and the people in the chat group. But I think it would just be kind of cool to have that sort of setup. So anyways, that's all my rambling and announcements for today. And I'll just have a quick look at the chat and see how we're doing there. All right, so we have a whole bunch of people watching today. That's pretty sweet. Oh, 404. Apparently the... Whoops. What the hell? How did that link... The link I posted to my... That's really weird. I don't know why the link I posted is not working. Maybe it's like blocking the link, but whatever. Just go to my website, wisesblog.com, and you can look at the first article if you want the MVP article. That's a little weird. So, what else have we got? Oh yeah, Ilya mentions, what do you think about Medium? I'll actually be posting this article, my Model View Presenter article, to Medium as soon as I'm done editing it, essentially. I still have a little bit of editing I want to do. I got some great feedback from one of my regular viewers, Tina Fredericks, so much appreciated on that, Tina. And yeah. I'm not... So just some random banter here before we get into technical stuff, but Prativ is asking, says congrats on your new job, Brian. Thank you. Where am I moving to? I'm actually going to stay in Victoria, unfortunately, which is, someone else asked, what city was it? Victoria, BC. I'm going to be basically moving just to a nicer neighborhood in Victoria, because I do actually want to move out of Canada for a while. Like I didn't get a chance to travel as a kid, so I really want to live in a different country. However, at this point, I've got this new job, so I've got to focus on that. And I've got really big plans for next year, or not next year, but by the end of summer, I really hope that WiseAss will actually be becoming something quite a bit larger than it is now. But I'm not going to say anything beyond that, other than to say Ryan's going to be spending this year working really hard on his coding skills, and there is a reason for that. Anyways, what else have we got? I'll probably shut up now. Yeah, again, Prativ mentioned something about an open source app. I'm going to be working on two major projects this year. One of them I can talk about. One of them is Catalyst, and I've got big plans for Catalyst. Some of the people saw me earlier building it in January. I've had to take a break from that because I had to take some time to really cement my Kotlin skills. So I built the Kotlin Calculator app, and then now that that's done and I've been working on a bunch of other crap, soon I'll be able to start working on Catalyst again. It will be open source, so if you would like to contribute to it, that's possible, but it's also going to be an app which I publish, so contributions to that app will be pretty limited, but I'll always have open source projects. In particular, if you would like to contribute at all to the Kotlin MVP project, that would be a great one. Sort of a community project. Anyways, I think it's probably time I shut the hell up and talked about something useful. So, let's get started here. All right, so this is great starting question here, because it leads into what I just talked about. So, you've got quite the name. Okay. So, Phoenix asks, Model View Presenter versus Model View Viewmodel for people starting out on Android architecture. The Real Stalin asks if I am a communist. No. And that's all I'll say on that. So, sorry, that was just a random question apparently the real Stalin, who I believe is no longer alive, asked me. So Deep Phoenix, whatever, Phoenix asks, yeah, what a weird question. Like, y'all are crazy. So Phoenix asks, and I'm going to note the time of this. What is this? 15. Okay. Sorry, I'm just noting the times so that I can do timestamps later, because I don't have time to do timestamps later. So Model View Presenter versus Model View Viewmodel for people starting out on Android. So first and foremost, as I just mentioned in the announcement, if you are starting out with these things, what I'm going to recommend you do is you read my article, which I just posted a link, but so it's WTF does Model View Presenter actually mean? I talk about a little bit more than just Model View Presenter in this article, but I'll get to answering you have a more specific question, but this article is meant to be an introduction to getting you thinking about architecture and three-layer architecture specifically. And as you can see, it's a fairly big topic. And I write a lot. So, yeah. So for some background information on these things, please do read that. I'm not just trying to get you to, you know, give me an extra view. That article is written for you. Now, you're asking, for people starting out, what's better? Model View Viewmodel for Model View Presenter. So for the rest of this question, what I will be answering is, for a beginner, what do I think is better? Model View Presenter or Model View Viewmodel? So for a beginner, I would say I would recommend Model View Presenter. Why would I recommend that versus Model View Viewmodel? There's a particular issue whenever I'm explaining architectures and three-layer architectures to people at this point, I always end up referring to three primary layers, and I go into this in the article, but there's UI, and then there's logic, and then there's data. And this kind of maps well to Model View Presenter. So the UI is the V, the data is the M, and then the P is the logic. And really what we're going for is we just want these three types of code to be separated into different objects. Why do I think Model View Presenter is sort of an easier entry point for this? Let's talk briefly about what the names of Model View Viewmodel imply. So of course we have the UI, which is the view. In fact, this is the same for both architectures. We've got the, oh, that was a good voice crack. We've got the, I swear I'm 24. We've got the data layer, which is the model. And then we've got, I was about to type logic, wait a minute, not really, we have a view model. What? Something that models the view? Okay. So this is fine. I'm not saying Model View Viewmodel is broken per se. But right off the bat, this is one of the main reasons why I don't suggest Model View Viewmodel for people starting out with three-layer architectures, which is that Model View Viewmodel, in my personal opinion, I understand why they use the word view model. I understand that that object in most interpretations, and I mean interpretations because there's not really a strict Model View Viewmodel pattern out there as far as I could research. In most interpretations, this view model object not only stores data, but it also controls logic. And that's confusing. And it almost necessitates another object, like some kind of a view controller. Now, what I'm trying to say here is you can do things Model View Viewmodel, and but the thing about it is, what I don't like is a lot of people, they'll ask the question, they'll see this term view model and they'll say, okay, I get it. This thing is like a model of the view, so it's going to hold the data that the view needs, but it probably also needs to tell the view what to, it probably also needs to listen to input from the view. When someone hits the view, that click event goes to the view model. Or you need another thing like a controller out there. So what I'm trying to say is I recommend ModelView Presenter because it's the least ambiguous. I'll write that out. I'm fond of ModelView Presenter as I find it to be the least ambiguous, that's a good English word, division of responsibilities. Now, you could arguably say that of MVC as well, but I'm not really going to get into the actual difference between ModelView Presenter and ModelView Controller because, again, that's something that's very open to interpretation. So I would recommend you start with ModelView Presenter, and the reason for it is really just I've seen some really good view model architectures, and I understand why there are some really neat benefits to doing that, but for someone to jump into ModelView view model, as someone who did that, what I think you'll find is that there's way too much interpretation, and very often the whole point of doing like a 3-layer architecture is to separate these main concerns, in my humble opinion. And those main concerns are stuff to draw things on screen, event logic handling, and data. And when you don't really include any object which appears to be managing data, or sorry, managing logic, there's a bit of ambiguity in there. You need to ask the question, so is the view model also a controller? Do I need a view controller as well that talks to the view model? So as you can see, it's really an argument of ambiguity. So that's my answer to, whoa, it's really windy outside. Sorry, there's a major kind of windstorm hitting my city, and it's like insane out there. Anyways, wow. So yeah, that's my answer. So, all right. So I'm just going to run a quick commercial break, and then we'll get back to more questions. All right, Mr. Stalin, I appreciate your input, but one thing, like, I don't really mind if you say off-the-wall shit, but don't spam my chat. So for that, you can basically fuck off. Idiot nachoy. Pardon my language, but yeah. That's kind of my one rule. Like, I don't mind if people want to post random stuff. Like, I grew up on the internet, I can take it, but don't spam a whole bunch of dumb shit, okay? Like, just don't do that. Anyways, moving on. And the reason why I hate that is then my chat is enormous and it's hard for me to find the questions, so that's why I really don't like spammy people. So anyways, let's get back to reality here. For people watching this, basically there was someone spamming a bunch of useless garbage, and like I say, I don't really mind if people talk shit, but just don't post messages over and over again. I just hate that. So what have we got here? So L4Z just asked, do I have a tutorial about ModelView Presenter application somewhere? So that's actually something I'm working on right now. I do have an old tutorial which covers Model View Presenter, but it was made like 2 years ago, and I'm a much better programmer since back then. So if you go to my Recycler View 2017 tutorial, you'll see what I build is essentially like Model View Presenter or Model View Controller, and that's sort of a beginner overview of doing it. So I would suggest my Recycler View 2017 tutorial. It's more than just showing you how to build a recycler view. It shows you the 3 basic layers. All right. What else have we got? Okay, I can riff on this one for a minute. This is a fairly specific question, and I totally forgot to look at the name. All right, so Amrat asks how to handle async tasks with orient change and activity lifecycle. So this is so for starters, let's just for everyone watching, what is async task? Async task is a way to perform an operation on a background thread and call back the result to the UI thread / main thread / whatever. Yeah, this thing appears to have several names. And so one of the issues that we run into, async task can cause NPEs and memory leaks if mismanaged. So for example, activity, so one of the most common things we're dealing with, and sort of the root of this question here is, let's say we have activity instance A. So we have activity instance A. So A calls an async task for a long running operation. Then user tilts phone before that completes. So now we have activity instance B. A is inactive / destroyed. And then we get when async task from A calls back to, what is it, on post execute, I think is the callback method. When async task from A calls back to on post execute, it will throw an NPE because A doesn't exist. And even if there's a special case where it does exist, it's a moot point because we have a new activity. So these are some of the issues you can run into with async task. And really the key thing that's happening is I've got something which is fragile asking something which is long running to do some long running operation, and then what's on this side might actually get destroyed, but this async task still calls back to the destroyed activity, and things like that. So the question is how to handle async task with orientation change and activity lifecycle. So I'm going to give you 2 potential solutions. So number one, ensure that the async task exists within a lifecycle aware component, such as AAC's Viewmodel. So I guess let me type the whole Android architecture component Viewmodel. So the first solution in English, take the async task outside of the fragile activity lifecycle. So this is kind of this is the main, however I gave you a hint as one way to do it, but whatever you do, really what you want to do is get this. So this is a point I make quite often, and I make this point with the understanding that there are lots of ways to use activity as a view, and there are ways to handle this that are fine, but my general suggestion to people is I wouldn't suggest you use activities for anything more than like a lightweight container, and then you stick everything else which might last longer in some separate architecture. It's very hard for me to verbalize this, but really what I'm saying is just don't leave async task inside something that can die. There's hacky ways to handle that. I shouldn't say hacky, but you can have your async task know something about the activity, but I don't like that solution because the async task is a task that's supposed to do something that has nothing to do really with the management of the life cycle of your application. And when you start like having your async task knowing about the activity, you start with this tight coupling garbage that's not very practical. There's ways to do it. My opinion is I don't even want to bother with that. So solution number 2, switch to either live data, which is from AAC, or RX Java, and just keep that stuff outside of the activity lifecycle. So before I finish this question off, damn it, I forgot to note the time that it was asked, but whatever. So let me show you what I mean about activities as containers. So if I open up this Kotlin Calculator app, just in a nutshell, what you'll see is for each primary feature of the application, which there's only one actually now that I recall, let me open the activity. And when you open the activity in almost any project I have made in probably the past 2 years, what you'll find, I know this is Kotlin, but what you'll find is that the activity basically does nothing except it grabs the fragment from the fragment manager. All my presenter stuff, all my backend stuff gets injected into the presenter. The presenter does not talk to the activity. What it talks to is the view, which is a fragment, and that's the fragment which gets contained within the activity. I also have retain instance set to true so that when the user tilts the phone, the fragment's state is maintained, although a key point, the view still gets recreated when you do that. So when you call this method in a fragment, onCreate will not be called again, but onCreateView and subsequent methods will be called again, because when you tilt the phone, it destroys the view. Unless you've restricted the orientation change. So that's basically my answer there. So the general thing that I'm going to suggest to you is the way to deal with all of this garbage, all of this activity lifecycle garbage, because let's be perfectly honest here, handling the Android lifecycle is friggin' annoying, and that's honestly why Google or the Android team came out with Android architecture components. These components are designed, like Viewmodel and live data, they are designed to persist independent of the not totally independent, but somewhat independent of the activity's lifecycle. Instead, they are, I believe, the application class stores an instance, like a map of your view models or some shit, but I don't know. Again, that's pretty deep implementation stuff that I can't remember. So yeah, that's basically my answer there. What else have we got? So I've got a question from Cigar about Bluetooth and I don't have experience with Bluetooth. I don't think it's exceptionally complicated, because really probably what you want to think of is just treat, the Bluetooth like another data source, like a REST adapter or a network. Like, ultimately that's what it is, but as far as helping you with implementation, I've never written an app that uses Bluetooth. So I can't really help you more than that. Maybe one day. So Shrey is asks, can you present your model? Could you be a little more specific what you mean there? I don't quite understand the question. Oh, I've got a video for you, D Phoenix. Okay. So this is going to be a fairly quick one, so whatever, 36 minutes. I'm just going to call you Phoenix. So, Phoenix. All right. So Phoenix mentions / asks, where should one sort of start using RxJava in an application, and how to gradually scale up the usage? So this is a really key question, because one of the things you figure out pretty rapidly once you understand the basic idea of RxJava is you could potentially kind of use it everywhere. And there were some people that sort of took that approach. And here's my main, I'll kind of answer a couple of things, but first and foremost, Phoenix, what I would say is, as a general rule, if part of your app is entirely sequential / synchronous, in essence doesn't need to be asynchronous, doesn't need to be represented as an event stream. As a general rule, if part of your app is entirely sequential, you don't need RxJava. Now, sometimes you might want to use it, so let me show you just a couple of brief examples here, and hopefully it'll clear some things up. So this is, again, Kotlin Calculator, link in the description box below, and I know it's Kotlin, but it's very close to Java, so, bear with me. So, when something happens in this calculator app's view, the view tells the presenter synchronously. It just says, hey, a button was clicked. It doesn't necessarily expose that click event as an event or an observable. When we go to the presenter, then we start to see this synchronous RxJava code pop up. Now, where do I choose to use RxJava in this app? Well, I choose to use it to represent basically the operations which I think will take an indeterminate amount of time. And within a calculator app, I could actually, in all honesty, probably just build this entire thing synchronously, but just because in most cases it's gonna be able to calculate the thing very quickly. But what I wanted to do is, so when a user types in an expression and then they hit the evaluate button, the equals button, I send that off to like a back-end service. So this is generally where you'll want to start with RxJava. Whenever you're making a call to something on the back end that might take an indeterminate amount of time, that's when you're going to want to set up an event stream, generally speaking. Now, this is an interesting thing. So every time the user hits a button, so like adds maybe a character to the display of the calculator, or deletes a character, or clears the display, What I do is I tell this Viewmodel synchronously what the change in state was. Now, a neat little trick, and this was mentioned to me by my friend Darrell, so props to him for... I asked him, like, is there anything you see here that could be done better? And he's like, well, how about whenever you update the Viewmodel, have the presenter just listen for that change instead of the presenter always having to ask the Viewmodel for new data. And so what we do there is we use this publish subject. So it publishes that data. So anytime the presenter sets the data of the Viewmodel, so I want you to think that is basically just the state of the user interface at any given point in time. Whenever that happens, we update that change to the presenter, and that's going to occur down in this callback here. So anyways, I've kind of tangented a little bit, but what I'm saying is, so as a general rule, so if you want, two things. I'm glad you mentioned RxJava. So this is for anyone listening that needs help with RxJava. So I've recently created an introduction to RxJava called, what did I call it? The Observer Pattern on Steroids. That's what the video is called. You check my channel. It's basically an introduction to how RxJava works. So please watch that video if you're confused about RxJava. I think you'll probably find that it's will give you a way of thinking about RxJava if you didn't have one before and you just don't really understand what's happening under the hood, kind of thing. And there was a second point I was going to get to, but I might have forgot it. Yeah, I think I forgot what it was, but check out that. And as like just a general, like I say, as a general rule, you don't use RxJava everywhere. It's annoying. It's not really necessary. And the moment you're working with someone that's not familiar with RxJava, then you're going to really piss them off. Now, whenever you have a part of your application which is asynchronous in nature, that's generally going to be your cue to represent it as a stream. Now, you can do more than what I did. Like, you can represent the clicks that occur in your view as an event stream with which the presenter observes. You can do all that stuff. My general approach is, if I didn't need to make this asynchronous before, I'm not really going to do it now, just for the sake of using RxJava. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm just going to run a quick commercial break, and then we'll get back to more Q&A. If you've liked the show so far, please do me a favor and hit the like button down below. All right. Salut, Monsieur Darrell. All right. So, what do we got here? This is a pretty quick one I can answer. What time is it? What is Aleppo? Okay. 44. All right. So, Dr. Shrey asks, are there any major open source projects which use Mvvm architecture? So, major projects? Not that I'm aware of. Let me show you a resource I like, and this is I feel bad because I'm always crapping on model view Viewmodel, but that was one of the big difficulties I had in learning it. Is I would look for a project and then I'd see certain things and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is what Viewmodel is, or model view Viewmodel. Then I'd go to another project and see something pretty friggin' different. But overall, I just didn't see many examples at all. But let me show you what I would recommend. I do have a tutorial on basically model view Viewmodel, which is the let's build a room database app 2017, but it's not a large scale project, which is kind of what you're asking for. Where is this? Okay, so if you're going to do model view Viewmodel on Android, you're probably going to want to reference this repo here. Google samples and Android architecture. And let me pull this, I'll paste it in the, I just commented it. Let me just pull the repo up for a moment. So this is, I really, everyone who worked on this thing is an absolute amazing, wonderful person. So this is a collection of projects which not just Android developers, but other talented developers have come together and put together just a whole bunch of samples. And so I would suggest having a look at maybe this one to do Mvvm live and so forth. And there's a lot of different examples, like you've got this thing going on. So if you really want to use model view Viewmodel and you'd like a code example, I would suggest this. I absolutely love that these people put these apps together, because there's nothing better than having open source code that works to demonstrate a principle instead of having to learn it through an article or whatever. So that'd be my suggestion. As far as, like, you mentioned the major open source projects, I haven't really seen any. I'm not saying they're not out there. Looking at model view Viewmodel and doing the room database tutorial was enough for me to know I'm not switching to model view Viewmodel. My model view presenter is evolving into something different, but it's not gonna evolve into what most people appear to think model view Viewmodel is. But anyways, I'll shut up about that. Surprisingly. Anyways. So L4ZS, will the new project be in Java or Kotlin? It will be, my model view presenter tutorial will be based on the Kotlin Calculator app. So it will be Kotlin. And that tutorial will be Kotlin. I might be able to make a Java version of the repository, but I'm not going to do a tutorial for it because I just don't have time, and I might not have time to do that. So yeah, here's the situation. I'm not abandoning Java, and I don't hate Java, but when you've worked in Kotlin for like a month, you really start to see that the direction it's heading really is just a much better version of Java. And so what's either going to happen is Java is going to drastically improve and catch up to Kotlin. But even if Java can drastically improve, I don't even know what the new version is. I think it's Java 9. The problem with that is, okay, then we got to wait for all the compatibility with it. And what I'm trying to say here is I'll always be able to help you guys with Java because it's, you know, they're fundamentally the same, but I don't expect a lot of Java content on this channel anymore. because Kotlin is interoperable with Java. So I would basically be deliberately writing in a language which doesn't really give me as nearly as much convenience, doesn't give me anywhere near the amount of convenience, and is also missing some features that I really like. So anyways, that's kind of my answer there. What else? All right. What are we at here? 50. So, my friend Omar asks, Ryan, do you prefer to use a DI framework like Dagger 2 in your app? And what kind of apps must use DI? So, here's what I would say, Omar. So, if you're building a small application like a calculator, there's no need to use Dagger 2. There's just no need. And let me show you what I do. So again, if we go back to this Kotlin Calculator app, if you go to the dependency injection package, you're going to find this class called injector. And this is essentially my DI implementation without a library. And all it does is when we want a presenter, so when the view wants its presenter, the view passes itself into this injector object, and then we create a presenter with the view and with a view model independent of the life cycle of the activity, with a scheduler and this use case thingy here with all of its back-end implementation. So essentially, even if you're building an app which is tiny, I would still suggest you practice the principles of DI and you write like one of your own handwritten class. This doesn't take long, it's not magic, it's not rocket science, and it will help you test your app easier. So that's what I would recommend for small projects. For a project of any size and scale, what you'll find is this class will start to get friggin' enormous, and then that's where you're going to want to use probably Dagger 2. There was a couple of libraries that popped up like Toothpick and Coin and Codeine, which are also dependency injection libraries. Those are all fine, and if you like using them, carry on. But the thing about Dagger 2 is that it was made by some of the best API builders on the planet. So there are benefits to using Dagger 2 in the back end. For example, it doesn't use reflection. There are benefits to using it that I think if you... What I'm trying to say is I spent some time looking into other options, because Dagger 2 is complicated, but when it came down to it, it was like, okay, I'm either going to write my own thing or I'm going to use Dagger 2, because I don't want to learn anything else if I'm not 100% sure that, like, Dagger 2 conforms to the JSR-330 specification, if I recall correctly, which is basically a bunch of people getting together and saying, this is how dependency injection should be done, and there's reasons you want to use it. So, so to give you an idea, like for my POS Trainer application, which is like a medium to small scale app, pretty much, it's not very large, I still use Dagger for it, but in retrospect, I probably wouldn't. And then for Catalyst, which is going to be a medium to large scale application, I'm actually going to integrate a user base into it at some point. For that, I'm definitely going to use Dagger 2, because I don't want to be writing all of... That's when the Dagger 2 tool starts to do a lot of work for you. There's sort of like a threshold between setting up Dagger takes a lot of time versus setting up Dagger will save you a lot of time. And it depends on the scale of the project. So hopefully that answers your question. Sorry, Shrey Shrey noticed that I wrote Dr. Shrey. Sorry, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's just a little joke. My brain is weird, but I thought Dr. Shrey. Anyways. All right. Oh. Open source projects. Okay, yeah, whatever. Anyways, so what else have we got? So just a clarification. I guess Shrey was asking, is it being used by mid-sized projects, specifically the model view Viewmodel architecture? Yeah, I've heard. So there's a couple developers that I've read articles by, and some people really swear by it. One developer in particular, Florina, hopefully I'll spell her name correctly, Montanescu, I believe, has good content on Mvvm. And she works for a large-sized company, and I guess that is the architecture they use for the company. So, yeah, model view Viewmodel is used by medium-scale projects. All right. Oh, do I have an answer for you, Joe? Okay, let me get back to Jamie here. Holy crap, I have so many messages today. How do you implement a messaging bus to deal with scoffing issues? I have to. This is a very good question. So, Jamie asks, and how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us today. So, so Jamie asks, how would you implement a messaging bus to deal with scoping issues in anonymous event handlers and callbacks? So here's the thing, it's very hard to answer this question without understanding what you're trying to achieve and why you want the messaging bus and what kind of scoping you're talking about. And I'm not, like, I'll just say right off the bat, I haven't really worked with Event Bus because that's basically, as opposed to having supervising entities that oversee a large quantity of operations and events and callbacks, I try to use RxJava so that everything is like event-based, and I don't need like a supervising event bus to really do that kind of thing. So I'm not saying that that's the wrong way to do it, but what I am saying is I don't think I can help you with this question because it's not really how I've never... I'm trying to think. This is a very abstract question and it's hard to articulate, but if you can give me an idea of what you're trying to achieve, and a little more details, maybe I can help you more. And I'm not saying your question doesn't make sense. It's just it's a very hard question to answer without code, and also the fact that I understand what you mean by a messaging bus, but I don't really use that approach at all, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to help you with that. One of the things, we used to have this thing called Event Bus in Android, And it was kind of a nicer solution to some of the other older solutions. But one of the problems kind of with it is there can be some issues when part of your application almost exists outside of everything else. And that's almost kind of one of the reasons why you don't want to use Java reflection. As opposed to having an external object which decides things, I try and have, say, my presenter be capable of handling logic, and it does that through RxJava, which, yeah, again, I don't know if I can help you with the... if you can give me some more details, we might be able to work this out. But good question anyways. Sorry I can't help you better than that. All right. Cool. We got two more. I'm going to try and fire these two questions off. So Joe asks, welcome back, Joe. So, so oftentimes I'll do a long-winded, rambly answer with this kind of question, but let me just try and do a quicker answer here this time because we're close to the end of the show. And there's another question I'd like to get to. So, so Joe asks, can I give any advice on how to get a first job without a CS degree? So Joe only has a year of non-professional experience with Android and can't seem to break through. So I can relate to your situation, Joe, because I don't actually have a degree. I've been through the selection process of several app companies, and I recently turned down work at a company, or, well, recently as in last year, but let me tell you the things that I needed to do to even be considered. So number one, you're going to have to prove your skills in code, preferably on GitHub. So the perspective you have to take, Joe, is that other people have this piece of paper that says they studied something, and you're not going to have a piece of paper that says that. You're going to have code hosted online in kind of a portfolio, at the bare minimum, GitHub, and that is going to be your resume and your proof of experience. Because your difficulty is, if you want to be a self-taught coder, that is something which is being more and more allowed in companies. They're more concerned about if you can actually write the code than if you have the piece of paper, at least in North America. This could be totally different in... It appears to me, and I could be wrong, that in India and Asia, they really want you to have the degree. They probably won't even look at you. I don't know how true that is, but in North America, we're all starting to catch up to the idea that universities and colleges don't actually, you know, a degree isn't what it used to be. Suffice it to say, I'm not shitting on anyone who has a degree, and I'm not saying don't get a degree. I'm just saying I didn't, and I don't want to, and no one could convince me to go back and pay $40,000 to get a substandard education. But anyways, so you're going to have to prove your skills in code. Whenever you apply to a job, this is really key. Note what technologies / APIs they use, and try to come up with some sample code / an app which demonstrates it. So really what I'm trying to say here, Joe, is since you don't have the degree, when you apply to a company, you're going to have to prove to them that you're already pretty good at your job, and they're not going to have to teach you from square one. Because if they have to teach you from square one, they're going to look at that as like an investment kind of thing. Well, do I want to, am I going to gamble my time on teaching this person, or am I going to hire someone who already has taken initiative and learning in technologies that the company uses? And that's really key. So that's really my biggest tips is your GitHub account is essentially your resume. And if the moment that I started to get good feedback from applying to jobs was when I started to host this code online, and then people would be like, okay, at least this person has initiative. And the time when I like destroyed an interview, several interviews, and did very well was I went to a company and I said, hey, I already kind of knew what technologies they use, and I said, here is an application which uses these technologies. And so, yeah, that's basically, that is how you want to go about getting a job if you don't have a degree. Be really good at what you do and be able to demonstrate what you can do. Okay, let's probably do like one more here. Yeah, I noticed that, but I totally forgot about it. Florina is actually now at Google, and so is Jake Wharton. So Google is grabbing up the talented developers again. Fair enough. All right. So I'm going to do one more question from Assad. Okay, you've got 6 months of experience. Okay. This will be the last sort of Android-specific question I will answer, and then there will be a couple minutes of just random babbling if I feel like it. But so this question is from Assad. And we are about an hour and 9 minutes in. So Assad asks a couple comments here. So Assad has 6 months of experience. He asked if I could suggest how to learn Android on his own. Okay. Joe, just a random quick, Joe mentioned that he does have a lot of repositories. I should mention the one that I brought to the table at that interview was a fairly big app, so maybe having one quite good app is a good approach, but maybe you already have that already. Anyways. I totally forgot. Sorry, totally sidetracked. Okay, so yeah, Assad asks, so Assad's got 6 months of experience, and he asked me if for tips on learning Android on his own, which is definitely something I'm qualified to answer. So here are, I do this every now and again, but here are my Ryan's main tips for self-learning Android. Number 1, apply a project-based learning approach. So you might want to write these down and make notes as I ramble. So number 1, apply a project-based learning approach. So what does that mean? As a beginner in almost any platform, this tip applies to more than just Android, by the way. As a beginner in any platform, what you will run into right off the bat, generally, is that there are so many topics. Even to do something simple like setting up a basic calculator requires you to kind of think about all these different things, and you're always bombarded with, no, you should do it this way, and this is a better way, and hopefully you want to keep improving. Hopefully you want to build really good applications. And one of the best ways to do that is to apply a project-based learning approach. So instead of learning topics in isolation, pick an app you would like to build and learn topics which help you solve problems in that application. Why do we do this? You will learn faster. So it does two things. Number one, it gives you a specific area of things you need to learn. So maybe for 3 months, I'm going to build an app that works with a database. And that is how you learn a database. And then you say, okay, I want to build another app that maybe teaches REST. Well, what could I maybe use that could sort of teach that principle for me? So that's my biggest tip, and I really can't stress this enough because not only will you learn faster because there's just less noise, there's just fewer topics. You know what you need to learn. You've got a problem you need to solve. So that'll help you learn faster. But also, when information is relevant to a problem you're solving right now, your brain retains it better. You'll remember it better. So that's really my biggest suggestion. In the start, it's okay if you have to refer to Stack Overflow a lot, but try to get away from that as soon as possible. You can look, I'll be honest, we've all done it. We've all, spent hours just not Googling, but just searching Stack Overflow and slapping code in there. And I don't really do that anymore. Like, I barely go on Stack Overflow. And the reason why is what you'll start to find pretty quick is that the best resource to learn Android is working open source code by good developers. This is, again, huge. Why is it better to learn from open source code as opposed to taking courses and reading articles and watching videos, all of which are valid? The reason why is there is no better way to get good at something and to understand how to do something than understanding it in the code. And this is something which I got really lost on for a while, is I was always trying to understand things in an abstract sort of way. And the thing is, no matter how good your abstract understanding of a topic is, if you can't write the code or read the code, your success in writing an app is going to be lower. I hope that's kind of a self-evident thing. So that's really all I'll give you for now. Is these are my main tips, Assad. So there's lots of more things I could talk about, but if you have like a more specific question, maybe ask next week or something. But those would be my main suggestions. Project-based learning. It's okay to go on Stack Overflow a bit when you're a beginner, but try to get away from doing that. And there's lots of reasons why. Again, I didn't really go into the specifics there, but I can at some point. And the best resource, try and learn from open source code. So earlier I linked everyone to this project, this repository here. Go check it out. It's amazing. And that's basically it. So I'm just going to run one last commercial break, and then I'll stick around to chat for a couple minutes, and that'll be it. Anyways, oh, just one moment, please. It's rapidly approaching 0 degrees outside. Where I live in Canada, we're getting hit with basically a freezing wind storm. So, like, I've got the heater on and everything, and I still need my grandfather sweater. Anyways. So just before I go, I'd just like to ask everyone, how is the audio today? Because I did something a little bit different. Normally I have my microphone like pinned on me, but what I was finding is every now and again when I would get a little bit more vocal, the volume would like shoot up and do weird things, and that was getting really annoying in post-production. So I've done something different. I just moved my microphone. I just literally taped it to the desk in front of me. So people could mention if the audio quality is still good. That would help me out. If it's too loud or too quiet, whatever. Cool. Looks like the audio is good. Thank you. I did get a job. I can't talk about it, but it pays well. And yeah, very happy because it was a pretty rough winter season for Ryan just because I was trying to learn Kotlin and really just hammer out my first principles understanding of Model View Presenter, because Model View Presenter is a topic I've been thinking about for over 2 years now, and I'm really reaching this point. You know, I've been reading lots of work from Martin Fowler and Monoka Bob, Uncle Bob. And one of the things I'm seeing is I'm just seeing that there's so much interpretation to things like Model View Presenter that I was finally just saying, okay, let's step back a minute and ask, like, if I can ramble for a moment about this. I think I will because I feel like it. To go back to the article I wrote, I sometimes I suspect people think sometimes I do and write things just to be provocative, and I would actually invite you to consider that I actually have zero interest in being provocative, and this is just the way I think and speak. But this article, I'm like, what? I won't actually say it, but WTF does Model View Presenter actually mean? What does this actually mean? Because to some people, Model View Presenter is just an abstract description of division of responsibilities. And that's not wrong. It's just, like, there's so much more to separation of concerns and three-layer architectures than I did Model View Presenter. Like, it's... Anyways, yeah. So, any random interesting stuff going on? Doesn't look like it. I'll answer this question, but So Anthony, how would I pronounce that? Anthony Fion-Maillet, maybe? Or maybe you're from North America and it's like Filion Maillet, but appears to be a fairly French last name, is asking, uses, so I'm not going to give a long answer, but Anthony mentions that he uses Model View Controller and asks, what is the best way to learn Model View Presenter / Model View Viewmodel with RxJava and Dagger? And my suggestion to you would be to browse my channel, because I have lots of stuff on all of those things. And one of the things that people always complain about with my videos is they're like, Ryan, why do you teach all of these things together? Why do you teach, you know, RxJava and Dagger when I just want to learn about Model View Viewmodel? And I'm like, listen, you're still going to have to build this thing with all these tools involved, so why don't I just show you the entire process? But then people, anyways, it's just kind of a regular rant. But I totally admit that so with my new Model View Presenter tutorial, I will be making lots of smaller videos to make everyone happy, but I'll still build the entire thing. And hopefully that will get people to just shut up and stop whining about the fact that I build entire applications on camera, because that's apparently not good enough. Anyways, I'll fully admit my production value is very poor. All right. Well, looks like that's basically it for today. If you enjoyed the show, please do me a favor and hit the like button down below. This week I will start to get working on my Model View Presenter Kotlin introductory series, and I've already got sort of a basic topics list, which actually I can share that with you right now. Probably I'll just give you kind of a sneak preview. Wo ist es? So this is tentatively the list of videos and topics I will be covering in the new tutorial. And the tutorial will be basically Kotlin, Android, and Clean Architecture fundamentals. And so, yeah, we'll start with an overview video of all the different topics. A brief explanation of Model View Presenter and why I actually also have a view model there. And oh yeah, that's going to confuse the hell out of everybody, I bet. And then, yeah, an explanation of the model and writing it. We'll probably talk about problem domain and use cases, but this is a subject which I'm still not churning my brain, but again, with this use case thing and entities and repositories, I'm starting to ask the question, well, okay, what's behind this that I need to understand? But anyways, simple. I'll show you how to write dependency injection just simply. Like, I'll show you how to write this injector class, which is like a handmade dependency injection. Yeah, it's going to be lots of interesting stuff. Handling orientation changes. I got asked about that several times today. We're going to write the presenter with test-driven development. I'm excited for this part because I'm going to actually show you how to use tests to drive the writing of a presenter and why you really want to use test-driven development for something like a presenter. Because if something has a lot of logic, that logic should be tested. Yeah, just all kinds of crap. I also had a question about Butterknife earlier. Do I use Butterknife? If I was writing a app in Java, I probably would. With Kotlin, we have synthetic properties, which has basically made Butterknife deprecated on Kotlin. It's essentially, like, let me show you Kotlin synthetic properties really quick. If I go to my view, you see there's no find view by ID. There's no binding. All I do is I just directly call the name of the XML element, and I might need to change the way I label my XML classes, because obviously we have this sort of breakdown of camel case here, but I just directly call the widgets within the layout, and what you have to do is you have to actually import the layout that you want these views from, which is fragment calculator, and then the star means I just want to import every view, and then you can just directly, you don't have to type find view by ID anywhere. It's really nice. You just directly set a listener, directly set a listener, or directly just say it's good. It's good. That's my technical explanation of synthetic properties. They're good. All right. That's it. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Jump on the Slack channel, link in the description box below.